Kate Rodriguez's fingers trembled as she checked her phone for the 14th time. 23 minutes late. The waiter had circled past her table 3 times now, his pitying glances making her stomach twist tighter each time. Around her, the restaurant buzzed with happy couples laughing over wine, their joy somehow making her loneliness feel sharper, more real. She'd worn her favorite red dress, the one that made her feel confident and pretty. She'd spent an hour on her makeup. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, nervous and hopeful. And now she sat alone, watching the door, feeling her hope crumble with each passing second. The breadbasket sat untouched. Her water glass was empty. She'd memorized every painting on the wall, counted every candle on every table, studied the pattern in the tablecloth until her eyes hurt. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading since agreeing to this blind date. He wasn't coming. He'd taken one look at her photo and decided she wasn't worth his time. Or maybe he'd never planned to show up at all. Maybe this was some cruel joke. Kate's chest felt tight. Her eyes burned. She wouldn't cry here, not in front of all these strangers. She reached for her purse, ready to leave and never speak to her well-meaning friend again, when the restaurant door swung open. 2 identical little girls burst through, their blonde pigtails bouncing as they scanned the room with determined expressions. They wore matching yellow sundresses and white sandals, and they moved with the kind of purpose that made everyone turn to look. Kate froze, her hand still on her purse, watching as the girls' eyes locked onto her. They marched straight to her table, weaving between waiters and surprised diners, their small faces serious and focused. "Are you Kate?" the first girl asked, slightly breathless. Kate nodded, too confused to speak. "Our daddy is really sorry he's late," the second girl said quickly. "He had an emergency at work, but he's coming. He promised. We came to make sure you didn't leave." Kate stared at them, her brain struggling to process what was happening. These children belonged to her date? He had children? Twin daughters who had somehow tracked her down to stop her from leaving? "Please don't go," the first girl said, and her voice cracked just slightly. "Daddy really wanted to meet you. He's been so sad since Mommy died, and Aunt Rebecca said you're really nice, and we heard him practicing what to say to you in the mirror this morning, and he was so nervous, and then the phone rang about the pipes breaking at the building site, and he had to go fix it because people were counting on him, but he really wants to be here." The words tumbled out in one long, desperate rush. Kate's heart, which had felt so heavy moments ago, suddenly felt like it might crack open for an entirely different reason. "He doesn't know we're here," the second girl whispered, glancing around as if checking for spies. "We took a taxi. We used our piggy bank money. Don't tell him yet, okay? He might get worried and forget to come." Kate looked at these 2 brave, determined little girls who had emptied their piggy banks and taken a taxi across town to save their father's first date in 3 years, and she felt something shift inside her chest. How could she possibly leave now? "I'm not going anywhere," Kate said softly, and the relief that flooded both girls' faces was instant and beautiful. "Would you 2 like to sit down while we wait for your daddy? Have you ever met someone whose children loved them so much they'd risk everything to see them happy again? What would you do if 2 little girls showed up to rescue your heart?" Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and please subscribe so you never miss a story about hope, love, and second chances. Kate Rodriguez had agreed to this blind date against her better judgment. Her best friend, Rebecca Chin, had been pestering her for months. "You just moved to Portland," Rebecca had said over coffee 3 weeks ago. "You don't know anyone. You spend all your time at the hospital. Kate, you're 29 years old and you haven't been on a date in over a year." "I've been busy," Kate had protested. "Starting a new job at a new hospital in a new city is exhausting." "It's been 6 months," Rebecca countered. "You're settled. You're lonely. And Thomas is perfect for you. He's kind, he's responsible, he's handsome, and he needs someone like you." Kate had finally given in, mostly because Rebecca was right about the lonely part. Working as a pediatric nurse meant long shifts surrounded by people, but at the end of each day she went home to an empty apartment. She'd moved to Portland for a fresh start after her relationship with her college boyfriend had fizzled out back in California. She'd needed change, needed to prove to herself that she could build a life on her own terms. But sitting alone in this restaurant, watching the door, Kate wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The restaurant Rebecca had chosen was beautiful. White tablecloths, soft lighting, fresh flowers on every table. The kind of place where proposals happened and anniversaries were celebrated. Kate had felt special when she'd first walked in, had felt like this might actually be the start of something good. Now she just felt foolish. She checked her phone again. 25 minutes late. No calls, no texts, no explanation. Around her, other diners enjoyed their meals, their conversations a gentle hum that somehow emphasized her solitude. A couple at the next table held hands across their plates. A family in the corner celebrated someone's birthday with a cake and singing. Everyone belonged somewhere with someone. Everyone except Kate. The waiter approached again, his smile professional but concerned. "Can I get you anything while you wait? Perhaps a glass of wine?" "Just water is fine," Kate said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sure he'll be here soon." But she wasn't sure at all. She was sure of the opposite, actually. She was sure she'd been stood up, sure this whole thing had been a mistake, sure she should have listened to her instincts and stayed home. Kate had always been the hopeful one, the optimistic one, the one who believed in happy endings. She'd chosen pediatric nursing because she loved helping children, loved seeing them heal and smile and go home to their families. She read romance novels before bed and cried at wedding videos online. She believed in love, in kindness, in the goodness of people. But right now, sitting in this restaurant alone, her belief felt fragile. She thought about Rebecca, who had gushed about this Thomas Bennett for weeks. "He's a contractor, owns his own company. He built that new community center downtown. He's genuine, Kate. Not like those guys on the dating apps who just want attention. He's ready for something real. Apparently not ready enough to show up on time. Or at all." Kate's phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. But it was just a notification from her bank about her account balance. She set the phone down harder than necessary. 30 minutes late now. She would give him 5 more minutes. Then she would leave with whatever dignity she had left. She would go home, change out of this red dress, order takeout, and pretend this evening had never happened. She would text Rebecca tomorrow and tell her no more blind dates, no more setups, no more believing in possibilities that turned out to be disappointments. Kate took a deep breath and reached for her purse. That's when the door opened and the 2 little girls walked in. They moved like they were on a mission, their identical faces set with determination. Kate watched them scan the restaurant, watched their eyes land on her, watched them march directly to her table without hesitation. Her hand froze on her purse strap. "Are you Kate?" the first girl asked. Up close, Kate could see she had bright blue eyes and a small gap between her front teeth. "Yes," Kate managed. "Our daddy is really sorry he's late," the girl continued. "He had an emergency at work, but he's coming. He promised. We came to make sure you didn't leave." Kate blinked. "Your daddy?" "Thomas Bennett," the second girl supplied. She looked exactly like her sister except for a small freckle on her left cheek. "He's your date. We're Sophie and Grace. We're 6. We're twins," Sophie added, as if this wasn't immediately obvious. Kate looked from one girl to the other, her mind racing. Thomas Bennett had children. Twin daughters. Who were currently standing at her table, breathless and earnest, begging her not to leave. "How did you get here?" Kate asked, the practical part of her brain kicking in. "Does your father know where you are?" The girls exchanged a look. "We took a taxi," Grace admitted. "We heard Daddy on the phone telling someone about his date at Romano's restaurant at 7 o'clock. We knew he wouldn't make it on time because of the pipes, so we got our piggy banks and called a taxi. The nice driver helped us count the money," Sophie added. "We had exactly enough with our birthday money from Grandma." Kate's heart did something complicated in her chest. These 6-year-old girls had heard their father's distress, had understood what was at stake, and had taken action. They'd pooled their resources, called a taxi, and tracked her down. All to save their father's chance at happiness. "Please don't leave," Grace said, and her voice was smaller now, more vulnerable. "Daddy has been so sad since Mommy died. Aunt Rebecca said you're really nice. She said you help sick kids get better and that you have a kind smile. Daddy practiced what to say to you this morning. He was really nervous. He wanted everything to be perfect." The words pierced through Kate's hurt feelings and disappointment. This man, this Thomas Bennett, hadn't stood her up out of cruelty or indifference. He'd had an emergency. And he'd apparently wanted this date so badly that even his daughters knew about it, cared about it, were willing to risk their piggy bank savings to protect it. "He doesn't know you're here?" Kate asked gently. Both girls shook their heads. "He would worry," Sophie explained. "He worries about everything. That's why Aunt Rebecca made him go on this date. She said he needed to remember how to be happy again." Kate looked at these 2 brave little girls in their matching yellow dresses, their faces so hopeful and anxious, and felt her anger dissolve completely. How could she possibly be upset now? How could she leave when these children had shown her more about their father's character in 5 minutes than hours of conversation might have revealed? "Well," Kate said, smiling for the first time all evening, "I guess we should order some breadsticks while we wait for your daddy. Would you two like to sit down?" The relief that washed over both girls' faces was immediate and profound. They scrambled into the chairs across from Kate, their legs swinging because they couldn't quite reach the floor. "You're really pretty," Grace said, studying Kate's face. "Your dress is really red." "Thank you," Kate said. "Your yellow dresses are beautiful." "Daddy bought them for us," Sophie said proudly. "He said yellow is a happy color, and we should wear happy colors because Mommy would want us to be happy." Kate's throat tightened. She reached across the table and gently squeezed both girls' hands. "Your daddy sounds like a very good man." "He is," they said in unison, and their absolute certainty made Kate's eyes sting with sudden tears. The waiter approached, looking confused by the sudden appearance of two children at Kate's table. Kate ordered breadsticks and juice for the girls, and as they waited, the twins told her everything. They told her about their mother who had died when they were 3 years old. They didn't remember her very well, just feelings and impressions and the stories their father told them. They told her about their father who worked hard and read them stories every night and made silly faces to make them laugh when they were sad. They told her about Aunt Rebecca, who babysat them often and had been trying for months to convince their father to start dating again. "He said he wasn't ready," Grace explained. "But Aunt Rebecca said that nobody is ever ready, they just have to be brave." "Is that why you two were brave tonight?" Kate asked. "Coming here by yourselves?" Sophie nodded seriously. "Daddy is brave every day. He takes care of us even when he's tired. He goes to work even when he's sad. He does hard things because he loves us. So we thought we should be brave for him too." Kate had to look away for a moment, blinking rapidly. These children at 6 years old understood love and sacrifice in a way that humbled her. They'd seen their father's loneliness, his struggle, his hope, and they'd decided to fight for him. "He's going to be so surprised when he gets here," Kate said, smiling through the emotion in her voice. "And maybe a little mad," Grace admitted. "But not too mad. He never stays mad long. Especially when things work out good," Sophie added. "And this is going to work out good. I can feel it." Kate hoped Sophie was right. Because sitting here with these two remarkable little girls, she found herself actually hoping Thomas Bennett would walk through that door. Not because she needed a date or wanted to prove she hadn't been stood up, but because she genuinely wanted to meet the man who had raised such brave, loving, thoughtful children. A man who practiced what to say in the mirror. Who bought his daughters happy yellow dresses. Who had been too sad to date for 3 years but had finally found the courage to try again. Kate checked her phone. 38 minutes late now. But she wasn't counting anymore. She was listening to Sophie and Grace tell her about their school and their friends and their dog named Biscuit, and she was learning more about Thomas Bennett through his daughter's eyes than any dating profile could have told her. And when the restaurant door finally opened again 15 minutes later, and a tall man with dusty work boots and panicked eyes burst through looking desperately around the room, Kate was ready. Not ready to be angry or hurt or defensive. Ready to meet him. Ready to see what might happen next. Ready, perhaps, for something she hadn't expected when she'd walked into this restaurant an hour ago. Ready for possibility. The moment Sophie and Grace had heard their father on the phone that afternoon, they'd known something important was happening. They'd been playing in the living room, building a tower out of blocks, when Daddy had stepped into the kitchen to take a call. His voice had been different. Quieter. Nervous in a way they rarely heard. "Yes, Rebecca, I remember. 7 o'clock at Romano's. I got it written down. Red dress, you said? Okay. What? No, I'm not going to cancel. I promised. Yes, I'm nervous. Of course I'm nervous. I haven't done this in 3 years." Sophie and Grace had exchanged glances. Aunt Rebecca's name was involved, which usually meant something interesting was about to happen. They'd crept closer to the kitchen door, listening carefully. "I know the girls need this. I know I need this. You're right. It's time. Kate sounds lovely. I just hope I don't mess it up. What if I say something stupid? What if she doesn't like me? What if okay. I'll stop spiraling. 7 o'clock. Red dress. Romano's. I've got it." After he'd hung up, they'd watched him through the doorway as he stood at the counter, taking deep breaths like he did when he was trying to calm down. Then he'd looked at himself in the reflection of the microwave and started talking. "Hi, Kate. I'm Thomas. It's nice to finally meet you." "No, that's too formal." "Hey, I'm Thomas. Rebecca has told me so much about you." "No, that sounds like I've been gossiping." "Hi, I'm Thomas and I'm really glad you agreed to this." Sophie had giggled and Daddy had spun around, his face going red. "How long have you two been spying on me?" "We weren't spying," Grace had protested. "We were just listening very carefully." Daddy had sat down on the floor with them, pulling them both into his lap. "Okay, so you heard. Daddy has a date tonight. with a very nice lady named Kate. Aunt Rebecca thinks we might like each other. Is she going to be our new mommy? Sophie had asked, and Daddy's face had gotten complicated the way it always did when they talked about mommies. No, sweetheart. Nobody can replace your mommy. But maybe, if things go well, Kate could be someone special in our lives. Someone who makes us happy. Would that be okay? Both girls had nodded enthusiastically. They wanted Daddy to be happy. He was happy with them, they knew that. But sometimes they caught him looking sad when he thought they weren't watching. Sometimes they heard him talking to the picture of Mommy that sat on his nightstand, his voice quiet and lonely. What if she doesn't like you? Grace had asked practically. Then I'll come home and we'll have ice cream and watch a movie, Daddy had said. And life will go on just like it has been. But I have to try, okay? I have to be brave. They'd hugged him tight, and then he'd gone to get ready for his date. That had been at 5 o'clock. At 5:45, Daddy's phone had rung again. This time his voice had been stressed and urgent. A burst pipe? At the Morrison site? How bad? That bad? Okay, I'm coming. No, don't call anyone else. I'll handle it. I know about tonight, I know, but there's flooding, and if we don't fix it now, the damage will be catastrophic. I'll be as quick as I can. He'd rushed to tell Mrs. Patterson next door that he had an emergency and needed her to watch the girls. He'd promised he'd be back as soon as possible. He'd looked so worried and sad as he'd left, still wearing his work clothes because there hadn't been time to change. Sophie and Grace had watched from the window as his truck pulled away. He's going to miss his date, Sophie had said quietly. Kate is going to think he doesn't like her, Grace had added. They'd looked at each other and somehow, without words, they'd both known what they needed to do. Mrs. Patterson was lovely, but she was old and she liked to nap in the recliner. By 6:15 she was snoring softly, her knitting in her lap. Sophie and Grace had tiptoed to their room and retrieved their piggy banks. Between them they'd had $43.50. Birthday money from Grandma, allowance they'd saved, coins they'd found around the house. They'd carefully put all the money into one of their small purple backpacks. Then they'd looked up the number for a taxi company on the tablet Daddy used to show them educational videos. They'd called and a nice lady had answered. We need a taxi to come to 428 Maple Street, Grace had said, trying to sound grown up. Honey, are your parents home? The lady had asked. Our mommy is in heaven and our daddy had an emergency, Sophie had explained. But we need to get to Romano's restaurant before 7 o'clock. It's very, very important. There had been a long pause. Then the lady had said, Sweetie, how old are you? We're 6, they'd said together. Another pause. Is there an adult there with you? Mrs. Patterson, but she's sleeping. Please, we have money. We counted it. We need to help our daddy. He's going to miss his first date in 3 years and the lady is going to be sad and lonely and it's not his fault about the pipes. Maybe it was the desperation in their voices. Maybe the dispatcher had a soft heart. Or maybe she'd sensed something genuine in their plea. Whatever the reason, she'd said, Okay, honey. I'm going to send my most trusted driver and he's going to make sure you get there safely. But you have to promise me that this is a real emergency. It is, they'd promised. It's a hard emergency. The taxi had arrived at 6:35. The driver was a grandfather type with kind eyes named Frank. He'd been briefed by the dispatcher and had checked to make sure they had enough money before helping them count it out. Romano's restaurant, right? He'd confirmed. Yes, please. As fast as you can. During the drive they'd told Frank everything. About Mommy dying. About Daddy being sad. About the date and the pipes and how they needed to make sure Kate didn't leave before Daddy could get there. Frank had listened and nodded and driven carefully but quickly. When they'd arrived at 6:53, he'd helped them out and had even waited to make sure they made it inside safely. You two are very brave, he'd said. Your daddy is lucky to have you. Inside the restaurant, they'd immediately spotted Kate. She'd been wearing a bright red dress just like Aunt Rebecca had said. She'd been sitting alone, looking at her phone, and even from across the room they could see she looked sad. That's when they'd marched over, determined to fix this before it was too late. Now, sitting at the table with Kate, eating breadsticks and drinking apple juice, Sophie and Grace felt proud of themselves. Kate wasn't leaving. She was smiling. She was nice just like Aunt Rebecca had promised. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice, and when she'd held their hands across the table, her skin had been warm and soft. Tell me more about your daddy, Kate said, and they'd been happy to oblige. They told her about how Daddy always made them breakfast before school, even when he was tired. How he'd learned to braid their hair by watching videos online, and even though the braids were sometimes lumpy, they always told him they were perfect. How he came to every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment. They told her about the treehouse he'd built in the backyard, and how on summer nights they'd sleep out there and he'd point out constellations and tell them stories. How he sang silly songs in the car that made them laugh. How he always kissed them goodnight and told them they were the best thing that had ever happened to him. He cries sometimes, Grace said quietly, when he thinks we're asleep. We hear him in his room talking to the picture of Mommy. But he always smiles for us in the morning, Sophie added quickly. He never wants us to see him sad. Kate's eyes were shiny. He sounds like the best daddy in the world. He is, they agreed. What about you? Sophie asked. Do you have kids? Kate shook her head. No, but I work with children at the hospital. I help take care of them when they're sick. Do you make them feel better? Grace asked. I try my best, Kate said. I give them medicine and bandages, but mostly I just try to make them smile. Sometimes when you're sick, a smile can be the best medicine. That's what Daddy says, Sophie said, delighted. He says smiling uses less muscles than frowning, so we should smile to save energy. Kate laughed, and it was such a pretty sound that both girls smiled wider. They were telling her about their dog Biscuit when the restaurant door burst open and Daddy rushed in. He looked panicked, his eyes scanning the room frantically. He was still wearing his work clothes, dusty and slightly damp. His hair was messy, and there was a streak of something that might have been mud on his cheek. When his eyes landed on their table, relief and horror crossed his face in quick succession. There's Daddy, Grace said unnecessarily. Sophie waved. Hi, Daddy. Thomas Bennett started toward them, weaving between tables, his face cycling through about 6 different emotions. Kate watched him approach, and the girls watched Kate watching him, holding their breath. This was the moment. This was when they'd find out if their brave plan had worked. This was when everything would change. Thomas Bennett had experienced some difficult moments in his 34 years of life. His wedding day had been pure joy, but his wife's funeral had been the darkest day he could remember. The day the doctors had told him Hannah's cancer was terminal. The day he'd had to explain to 2 3-year-old girls that Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. But the panic he'd felt when he'd arrived home 45 minutes ago to find Mrs. Patterson still asleep and his daughters gone was something entirely new. He'd called their names, searched every room, checked the backyard and the treehouse. Nothing. He'd woken Mrs. Patterson, who'd been horrified to realize they'd vanished on her watch. He'd called Rebecca in a panic, called the neighbors, was 2 seconds from calling the police when Mrs. Patterson had found a note in the girl's room. In Sophie's careful handwriting, gone to help Daddy's date. Love you. Be back soon. Thomas's panic had shifted slightly. They hadn't been kidnapped. They'd left on purpose. But where? Oh. And then it had hit him. Romano's restaurant. The date. His date that he'd completely missed because of the pipe emergency. The date he'd been so nervous about, so hopeful for. The first date in 3 years and he'd blown it. Kate had probably left an hour ago, probably furious or hurt or both. And somehow his daughters had known about it and had gone to do what? Stop her from leaving? Find her? He'd driven to Romano's like a man possessed, breaking probably 3 traffic laws, his heart hammering against his ribs. If anything had happened to Sophie and Grace, if they'd gotten hurt trying to help him, he would never forgive himself. And now here they were, sitting at a table with the most beautiful woman Thomas had ever seen, eating breadsticks and laughing like this was a perfectly normal situation. Relief hit him first. They were safe. They were fine. They were smiling. Then mortification crashed over him like a wave. His daughters had crashed his blind date. They'd somehow gotten themselves across town to rescue a date he'd stood up. And Kate, gorgeous Kate in her red dress, was seeing him for the first time covered in pipe water and mud, almost an hour late with his wild children causing chaos. Thomas reached the table and all 3 females looked up at him. Daddy? Sophie bounced in her seat. You made it? We told Kate you'd come. Hi, Grace added cheerfully. Kate is really nice. We like her. Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Kate, whose expression he couldn't quite read, opened his mouth again. I am so sorry, he finally managed. I can explain. Well, I can try to explain. There was a pipe emergency at a construction site and I had to fix it or there would have been thousands of dollars in damage, and I thought the girls were safe at home with Mrs. Patterson, and I have no idea how they got here, and I am so incredibly sorry about all of this. Kate's face did something complicated. Then, impossibly, she smiled. It's nice to finally meet you, Thomas, she said, and her voice was warm and kind. Your daughters have been keeping me excellent company. Would you like to sit down? Thomas stared at her. She wasn't angry? She wasn't storming out? She was inviting him to sit? I'm covered in pipe water, he said stupidly, gesturing at his damp clothes. That's okay, Kate said. I'm a nurse. I've seen worse. We told her everything, Sophie explained. About Mommy and about you being sad and about the piggy banks and the taxi. You took a taxi? Thomas's voice came out slightly strangled. You're 6 years old. You took a taxi across town by yourselves? We had $43.50, Grace said proudly. It was enough. And Frank was really nice. He made sure we got inside safely. Thomas sat down heavily in the empty chair, not because Kate had invited him but because his legs suddenly felt weak. His daughters had taken a taxi. By themselves. Because he'd been about to miss this date. Because they'd wanted to help him. He didn't know whether to ground them forever or hug them until they couldn't breathe. I should be furious with you too, he said looking at the twins. You know that, right? You left the house without permission. You took a taxi. You could have been hurt. This was dangerous and irresponsible. Both girls' faces fell. But we wanted to help, Sophie whispered. We didn't want you to be sad again, Grace added, her eyes filling with tears. Thomas felt his anger drain away instantly. He reached across the table and took both their small hands in his larger ones. I know you were trying to help. And we'll talk about this later. But right now the most important thing is that you're safe. He looked at Kate, who was watching this exchange with soft eyes. I'm Thomas Bennett, in case that wasn't clear. I'm late, I'm a mess, my children just pulled off some kind of spy mission, and I completely understand if you want to just leave right now. Why would I leave? Kate asked. I've been sitting here for over an hour. I'm starving. And Sophie and Grace have told me so many good things about you that I'm actually curious to see if you live up to the hype. Thomas blinked. You're not angry? Oh, I was angry, Kate admitted. About 40 minutes ago I was very angry. I thought I'd been stood up. But then these two walked in and explained everything, and honestly, Thomas, anyone who has raised daughters this brave and loving and determined has to be doing something right. Something in Thomas's chest loosened. She understood. She wasn't holding the lateness against him. She was sitting here, smiling at him, and his daughters had somehow made this disaster into something that might actually work. They really took a taxi? He asked weakly. Emptied their piggy banks and everything, Kate confirmed. They're quite resourceful. They're grounded, Thomas said, but he was smiling slightly. For at least a week. Maybe 2. That's fair, Sophie said, looking relieved that the punishment wasn't worse. The waiter appeared, looking amused by the chaos at this table. Are we ready to order? Thomas looked down at himself. I should probably go home and change first. Nonsense, Kate said firmly. You're here now. Let's eat. Unless you need to get these two home. Thomas pulled out his phone and quickly texted Mrs. Patterson that the girls were safe and with him. Then he texted Rebecca. Your plan worked, but not how you expected. We'll explain later. Okay, he said, setting his phone down. Let's do this. But I'm warning you, I have no idea how to act on a date anymore. And my children are apparently master manipulators who can orchestrate complex rescue operations. We learned from the best, Grace said innocently, making Kate laugh. As they ordered food, Thomas felt himself starting to relax. Kate was easy to talk to. She laughed at his jokes. She asked questions about his work and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. She told them about her job at the hospital, about moving to Portland, about how she'd been nervous about this date too. Rebecca really talked you up, Kate admitted. I was worried you'd be too perfect. Like maybe she was exaggerating. She definitely exaggerated, Thomas said quickly. I'm a mess most of the time. I burn dinner half the nights of the week. I can barely braid hair. I once showed up to a parent-teacher conference with my shirt on inside out. He got better at the braids, Sophie said loyally. They're much better now. And we like burnt grilled cheese, Grace added. It's crunchier. Kate grinned at the girls. You two are the best wingmen I've ever seen. What's a wingman? They asked together. Someone who helps their friends succeed, Kate explained. You two helped your dad tonight in a very big way. Because we love him, Sophie said simply. And we want him to be happy. We want all of us to be happy, Grace corrected. That's why we needed Kate to stay. She makes good happy. Thomas felt his throat get tight. His daughters, who'd been through so much, who'd lost their mother too young, who'd watched him struggle through grief and loneliness, were sitting here trying to build him a new life. Trying to give him permission to move forward. Trying to tell him that loving again wouldn't mean forgetting Hannah. Kate seemed to sense his emotion. She reached across the table and gently touched his hand. They're right. We all deserve happiness. and second chances. And dinners with new friends, even if those dinners start a little chaotically. A little chaotically? Thomas laughed, but it came out shaky. Kate, my 6-year-olds took a taxi. This is probably the most chaotic first date in history. Maybe, Kate agreed. But it's also probably the sweetest. And the most honest. I know more about you from 1 hour with Sophie and Grace than I would have learned from a perfect planned date. I know you're a good father. I know you're still healing from loss. I know you're brave enough to try again. And I know you raised 2 incredible little girls who love you enough to risk their piggy bank savings. Thomas looked at her, really looked at her. At her kind eyes and genuine smile. At the way she'd welcomed his daughters instead of being put off by them. At how she'd listened to their stories and held their hands and made them feel special. Rebecca had been right. Kate was special. I practiced what to say to you, Thomas admitted. This morning in the bathroom mirror. I had a whole speech planned. Oh. Kate leaned forward, interested. What was it? I can't remember now, Thomas said honestly. My brain is still processing the fact that my daughters are sitting here. But it was something about being nervous and hoping you'd like me and being grateful for second chances. I like you already, Kate said softly. And I'm grateful too. For second chances. 4 brave little girls. 4 terrible timing that somehow turned into perfect timing. Sophie and Grace beamed at each other, clearly pleased with how their plan had worked out. The food arrived and they ate together, the conversation flowing easily now. Thomas told stories about construction disasters. Kate shared funny moments from the hospital. The girls chimed in with their own observations and questions, and somehow this strange, chaotic dinner became one of the best evenings Thomas had had in years. When dessert came, Sophie and Grace shared a chocolate cake while Thomas and Kate both ordered coffee. So what happens now? Thomas asked quietly while the girls were focused on their cake. I know this isn't how first dates usually go. I don't know, Kate admitted. But I'd like to find out. If you're willing to try this again. Maybe next time with fewer taxi rides and more advanced planning. I would like that very much. Thomas said and meant it completely. As they left the restaurant later, the girls walking ahead and holding hands, Kate and Thomas lingered on the sidewalk. Thank you, Thomas said. For staying. For being kind to them. For giving me a chance despite everything. Thank you for raising amazing daughters, Kate replied. And for being brave enough to show up, even covered in pipe water. They exchanged numbers, made plans to meet again, and then Thomas loaded his daughters into his truck. As they drove home, Sophie and Grace chattered excitedly about how nice Kate was and how pretty she was and how much Daddy had smiled during dinner. Thomas listened to them, his heart full in a way it hadn't been since Hannah died. He'd been so scared to move forward, so afraid that dating again would mean betraying her memory or confusing his daughters. But looking in the rearview mirror at Sophie and Grace's happy faces, he realized they'd been ready for this before he was. They'd known what he needed before he'd fully accepted it himself. They'd been brave for him when he couldn't be brave for himself. And maybe, just maybe, that bravery was about to lead all 3 of them somewhere beautiful. 3 days later, Kate met Thomas at a small coffee shop downtown. No children this time. Just the 2 of them in daylight, both properly dressed and on time. Thomas wore clean jeans and a green button-up shirt. Kate wore blue slacks and a white blouse. They looked like normal people on a normal second date, and somehow that felt both comfortable and strange after the chaos of their first meeting. This feels almost boring after last time, Kate said, smiling as she stirred sugar into her latte. Thomas laughed. I promise most of my life is actually very boring. The girls' taxi adventure was an outlier. How grounded are they? 1 week, no TV or tablets, Thomas said. But honestly, they're so proud of themselves that I don't think they mind. They keep telling everyone at school about their mission. Their teacher must love that story. Mrs. Franklin called me yesterday. Apparently, Sophie told the entire class about how she and Grace rescued Daddy's date with a taxi and $43. Mrs. Franklin wanted to make sure I knew they'd done this and to check that everyone was okay. Kate laughed, imagining the scene. What did you tell her? That yes, it really happened, and yes, we're working on appropriate boundaries and safety, Thomas said. But also that their hearts were in the right place, even if their methods were questionable. They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence for a moment. The coffee shop was cozy with brick walls and mismatched furniture. Soft music played in the background. Other customers worked on laptops or chatted quietly. Can I ask about their mother? Kate said gently. The girls mentioned she passed away. But only if you're comfortable talking about it. Thomas took a deep breath. This was the conversation he'd been dreading and knowing was necessary. Her name was Hannah. We met in college. She was studying art history and I was in engineering. We were completely different, but somehow it worked. We got married right after graduation. He pulled out his phone and showed Kate a photo. Hannah had been beautiful, with long blonde hair and bright eyes. She was laughing in the picture, one hand on her pregnant belly. This was taken a few weeks before the girls were born, Thomas said. She was so excited to be a mom. We both were. She was lovely, Kate said softly. The girls were about 6 months old when she started feeling tired all the time, Thomas continued. We thought it was just exhaustion from having twins. But it kept getting worse. Finally, she went to the doctor and they ran tests. Leukemia. Aggressive. Already advanced. Kate reached across the table and squeezed his hand. She didn't interrupt, just let him talk. She fought for 2.5 years, Thomas said. Chemo, radiation, clinical trials. Everything. She was so strong. But it wasn't enough. By the time the girls were 3, she was too weak to get out of bed. She died at home with me and the girls there. We got to say goodbye. A tear slid down Thomas's cheek. He wiped it away quickly. Sorry? It's been 3 years, but sometimes it still hits me hard. You don't have to apologize, Kate said. Grief doesn't have a timeline. Thomas nodded, grateful. The first year after she died was the hardest. I didn't know how to be a single parent. I didn't know how to do hair or pick out clothes or explain why mommy wasn't coming back. My sister Rebecca moved in with us for 6 months to help. I don't know what I would have done without her. Rebecca is a good sister, Kate observed. The best, Thomas agreed. She pushed me to keep going when I wanted to give up. She reminded me that Sophie and Grace needed me to be strong. And eventually I figured it out. Not perfectly, but good enough. I think you're doing more than good enough, Kate said. Those girls are healthy and happy and clearly very loved. I try, Thomas said. But it's been lonely. I threw myself into work and parenting and I told myself that was enough. Rebecca kept saying I needed to date again, but I couldn't imagine it. How could I bring someone new into our lives? How could anyone understand what we'd been through? And what if the girls got attached and then it didn't work out? Those are all valid fears, Kate said. But then Rebecca kept pushing and finally I agreed to this blind date. I was terrified. I practiced what to say in the mirror like a teenager. I changed my shirt 3 times. And then the pipe emergency happened and I thought I'd blown my chance. And then my daughters took a taxi, he finished, shaking his head in disbelief. Kate smiled. Best taxi ride ever. You're really not bothered by any of this? Thomas asked. The fact that I have kids? That I'm still dealing with grief? That my life is complicated? Thomas, everyone's life is complicated, Kate said. And honestly, the fact that you have Sophie and Grace is a plus, not a minus. They're wonderful. And the fact that you loved your wife so deeply and still honor her memory tells me you're capable of real love. That's rare. Thomas felt something loosen in his chest. What about you? Rebecca mentioned you'd moved here recently. Was there someone back in California? Kate nodded. His name was Ryan. We met in college, dated through nursing school. We were together for 6 years. Everyone assumed we'd get married eventually. But we just kept waiting for the right time and the right time never came. Finally, I realized we were together because it was comfortable, not because we were truly in love. We wanted different things. He wanted to stay in San Diego forever. I wanted adventure, new experiences. So we broke up and I moved here for a fresh start. Do you miss him? Not really, Kate admitted. I miss having someone sometimes. I miss the companionship. But I don't miss him specifically. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Thomas said. Moving here was scary but good, Kate continued. I love working at the children's hospital. The staff is great, the patients are sweet. But I've been lonely. I didn't know anyone in Portland except Rebecca, and she's busy with her own life. So when she suggested this blind date, I figured why not? What did I have to lose? Almost an hour of your time waiting for a guy who didn't show up, Thomas said ruefully. But then I gained 2 new friends in yellow dresses, Kate countered. And eventually gained you. So I'd say it worked out. They talked for 2 more hours. About their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Thomas told her about his construction company, how he'd started it 5 years ago with a business partner who'd since retired. How he loved building things, creating spaces where people would make memories. Kate told him about why she'd become a pediatric nurse. How she'd been sick as a child with appendicitis, and the nurses at the hospital had been so kind that she'd decided that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be the person who made scared kids feel safe. The best part is when they go home, Kate said. When they've healed and they're smiling and their parents are crying happy tears. That's why I do it. That's beautiful, Thomas said sincerely. When they finally left the coffee shop, it was late afternoon. They walked slowly through downtown Portland, talking and laughing. Thomas pointed out buildings he'd worked on. Kate showed him the route she jogged in the mornings. Can I ask you something? Thomas said as they approached where they'd parked. And you can totally say no. But Sophie and Grace have been asking when they can see you again. They really liked you. Would you maybe want to come over for dinner this weekend? Nothing fancy. Just pizza and a movie. But they'd love to see you, and honestly, so would I. Kate didn't hesitate. I'd love that. Thomas smiled, relieved. Saturday? 6 o'clock? Perfect. They exchanged a slightly awkward goodbye, not quite ready for a kiss but both wanting more than a handshake. Finally, Kate hugged him briefly, and Thomas felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. As he drove home, he called Rebecca. So, she demanded immediately. How did it go? Really well, Thomas admitted. She's coming over for dinner Saturday. With the girls. Rebecca squealed so loudly Thomas had to hold the phone away from his ear. I told you she was perfect for you. Don't get too excited, Thomas warned. It's only been 2 dates. One of which my children crashed. Your children are geniuses, Rebecca said. Best wingmen ever. They're grounded. They're heroes, Rebecca corrected. Thomas, I'm so proud of you. You took a chance. You let yourself try again. Hannah would be proud too. Thomas's eyes stung. You think so? I know so, Rebecca said firmly. She loved you. She wanted you to be happy. And wherever she is, I think she's smiling right now. Thomas hoped she was right. When he got home, Sophie and Grace attacked him at the door, demanding to know everything about his date with Kate. Did you hold hands? Sophie asked. Did you kiss her? Grace wanted to know. We talked, Thomas said laughing. And had coffee. And walked around downtown. And she's coming over Saturday for pizza and a movie. With you too. The girls shrieked with joy and jumped up and down. We like Kate, Sophie declared. We want her to stay forever, Grace added. Thomas pulled them both into a hug. Slow down. We're just getting to know each other. But yes, she's very nice. And yes, I like her too. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Thomas sat in his room and looked at the photo of Hannah on his nightstand. She was smiling in the picture, holding newborn Sophie and Grace, her face exhausted but radiant. I met someone, he whispered to the photo. Her name is Kate. She's kind and funny and she's really good with the girls. I think you'd like her. I hope it's okay that I'm doing this. I hope you understand that I'll always love you, but I'm ready to try to be happy again. The photo didn't answer, of course. But Thomas felt a sense of peace settle over him. Hannah would have wanted this. She told him during those last hard weeks that she wanted him to find love again someday, wanted Sophie and Grace to have someone besides just him. Don't be alone forever, she'd whispered one night. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy again. He promised. And now, finally, he was keeping that promise. Thomas sent Kate a text before going to sleep. Thanks for today. I had a great time. Looking forward to Saturday. Her response came a few minutes later. Me too. Tell Sophie and Grace I'm excited to see them again. Thomas smiled at his phone and fell asleep feeling lighter than he had in years. Saturday arrived with sunshine and nervous energy. Thomas cleaned the house 3 times. He bought fancy pizza from the nice place downtown instead of regular delivery. He made sure there were fresh flowers on the table, then worried that was too much and put them in the living room instead. Then moved them back to the table. Daddy, you're being weird, Sophie observed from the couch where she and Grace were watching him pace. I'm not weird. I'm just making sure everything is nice for our guest. Kate isn't a guest, Grace said matter-of-factly. She's going to be family. Slow down, Thomas said, but his heart did that complicated thing again. We're just having dinner. The girls had dressed in their best dresses without being asked. Sophie wore purple, Grace wore pink. They'd even brushed their hair themselves, though Thomas would need to fix the tangles later. When the doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, all 3 of them jumped. Sophie and Grace raced to the door, Thomas following more slowly. Kate stood on the porch holding a bakery box and looking slightly nervous. She wore green jeans and a red sweater and she looked beautiful. Hi, the girls shouted in unison, pulling her inside. Hi yourself, Kate laughed. I brought cookies. I hope that's okay. Cookies are always okay, Thomas said, smiling. Come in. Welcome. She handed him the bakery box and then knelt down to hug both girls. They wrapped their arms around her like she was a long-lost relative, and Kate hugged them back just as tightly. "I missed you too," she said. "We missed you more," Sophie insisted. "Impossible," Kate teased. Thomas watched this interaction, his throat tight with emotion. Kate was so natural with them, so warm. No awkwardness, no forced enthusiasm. Just genuine affection. The evening unfolded easily. They ate pizza at the kitchen table, the girls chattering nonstop about their week at school. Kate asked questions and listened to their answers like they were the most interesting things she'd ever heard. After dinner, they moved to the living room for a movie. The girls had chosen an animated film about talking animals. They sat on either side of Kate on the couch, snuggled against her like they'd known her their whole lives. Thomas sat in the armchair watching. Halfway through the movie, Sophie fell asleep with her head on Kate's lap. Grace lasted until the credits, then dozed off against Kate's shoulder. "They're out," Kate whispered, smiling down at the sleeping girls. "They had a big week," Thomas said. "Let me get them to bed." He carefully lifted Sophie first, carrying her to the room she shared with Grace. Kate followed with Grace, and together they tucked both girls under their covers. Thomas kissed each forehead and Kate gently smoothed their hair back. "Sweet dreams," Kate whispered. Back in the living room, Thomas and Kate sat on the couch together, a comfortable distance apart but closer than they'd been before. "They're really special," Kate said. "You've done an amazing job with them." "I've done my best," Thomas said. "Some days are harder than others. But you show up every day. That's what matters." They talked quietly, not wanting to wake the girls. Thomas told her about funny moments from the week. Kate shared stories from the hospital. The conversation flowed like water, easy and natural. "Can I ask you something?" Kate said eventually. "And please be honest, are you okay with how fast this is moving? I know it's only been a week, but I feel like I've known you and the girls much longer. Is that weird?" Thomas considered this. It should feel weird. By all logic, this should feel rushed and overwhelming. But it doesn't. Feels right. Does that make sense? "Complete sense," Kate said, relief evident in her voice. "The girls really like you," Thomas continued. "Like really, really like you. They've been talking about you nonstop. And I want to make sure we're on the same page about expectations. I don't want them to get hurt if this doesn't work out." "I wouldn't hurt them," Kate said immediately. "Or you?" "I'm not here casually, Thomas. I'm here because I think this could be something real. Something good. But we can go as slow as you need." "What if slow isn't what I want?" Thomas asked quietly. Kate looked at him, her eyes soft. "Then we don't go slow." Thomas reached over and took her hand. It was the first time they'd held hands intentionally, and it felt monumental. Kate's fingers intertwined with his, and they sat like that for a long moment, just holding hands and being present. "I haven't held someone's hand like this in 3 years," Thomas admitted. "How does it feel?" Kate asked gently. "Scary," Thomas said honestly. "But good. Really good." They sat together until Kate needed to leave. At the door, they hugged goodbye, and this time it lasted longer. Thomas breathed in the scent of her shampoo and felt Kate's arms tight around his waist, and he thought maybe possibly he was ready for this. Ready to let someone in again. Ready to build something new without erasing what came before. Ready to let Kate become part of their family. If you're loving this story about second chances and brave hearts, please hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. And drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Do you believe Thomas and Kate are meant to be? Your support means everything to this channel. The next 3 weeks were some of the happiest Thomas had experienced in years. Kate became a regular presence in their lives, joining them for dinners, park visits, and trips to the ice cream shop downtown. She taught the girls how to make friendship bracelets. She helped Thomas fix a leaky faucet in the bathroom, surprising him with her practical skills. She attended Sophie's school play, where Sophie proudly pointed her out to all her classmates as our friend Kate, who's going to be part of our family. Thomas and Kate hadn't defined what they were yet. They hadn't used terms like boyfriend or girlfriend. But they texted every day. They called each other at night after the girls went to bed. They held hands when they walked. And Thomas found himself thinking about a future that included Kate in a permanent way. Then Patricia showed up. Patricia Morrison was Hannah's mother. She lived 2 hours away in Salem and visited about once a month to see her granddaughters. Thomas had a complicated relationship with her. Patricia was a good grandmother who loved Sophie and Grace deeply. But she'd never fully accepted Hannah's death. She kept Hannah's childhood bedroom exactly as it had been. She sometimes talked about Hannah in present tense, as if she might walk through the door at any moment. Thomas felt sorry for her but also found her visits emotionally exhausting. Patricia's grief was so heavy it filled entire rooms. She arrived on a Saturday morning, unannounced as usual. Thomas was making pancakes with the girls while Kate set the table. They just started laughing about something when the doorbell rang. Thomas opened the door to find Patricia standing there with her usual tight expression. "Patricia," he said, surprised. "I didn't know you were coming today." "I don't need an appointment to see my granddaughters," she said coolly, her eyes already moving past him into the house. "Who's that?" Thomas followed her gaze to where Kate stood frozen in the kitchen, spatula in hand. "That's Kate," he said. "She's my girlfriend." It was the first time he'd said it out loud, and even in this awkward moment, it felt good. Patricia's face went cold. "I see. And how long has this been going on?" "About a month," Thomas said, knowing this was about to get uncomfortable. "Kate, this is Patricia, Hannah's mother. Patricia, this is Kate Rodriguez." Kate set down the spatula and came forward, offering her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Morrison." Patricia looked at Kate's hand like it might bite her. After a long, painful pause, she shook it briefly. "Yes. Nice to meet you." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Sophie and Grace had appeared in the doorway, their faces uncertain. They could sense the tension even if they didn't fully understand it. "Grandma," Grace said, trying for cheerful. "We're making pancakes. Kate taught us how to flip them without breaking them." "How lovely," Patricia said, her voice dripping with something that wasn't quite sarcasm but wasn't warmth either. "I'm sure your mother would have taught you that eventually, if she'd had the chance." Thomas closed his eyes briefly. "Here we go." "Patricia," he said quietly. Don't what?" she asked, her voice sharp now. "Don't mention my daughter? Don't talk about the fact that she's been gone only 3 years and you've already replaced her?" "Nobody is replacing anyone," Thomas said firmly. "We've talked about this." "I haven't talked about this," Patricia snapped. "You didn't tell me you were dating. You didn't ask how I'd feel about a stranger being around my granddaughters." "I'm not a stranger," Kate said quietly but firmly. "I'm someone who cares about Thomas and Sophie and Grace very much." "You've known them a month," Patricia said dismissively. "I've known them their entire lives. I knew them before they were born. I knew their mother. You're just someone passing through." "That's enough," Thomas said, his voice harder now. "You're upset and I understand why. But you don't get to come into my home and speak to Kate like that." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "How can you move on so quickly? Anna loved you. She gave you those beautiful girls. And 3 years later you're having pancake breakfast with someone new like she never existed." "Hannah will always exist," Thomas said, his voice breaking slightly. "She's in Sophie and Grace. She's in my memories. She's in the stories I tell. But she's gone, Patricia. And I'm still here and I'm allowed to be happy again." "It's too soon," Patricia whispered. "The girls will forget her." "We won't forget Mommy," Sophie said suddenly, stepping forward. "We think about her every day. Daddy tells us stories about her. But we also really like Kate. She's nice to us. She makes Daddy smile. Don't you want Daddy to smile?" Patricia looked at her granddaughter and more tears spilled down her cheeks. "Of course I want him to be happy. I just miss my daughter so much." The anger drained from the room, replaced by shared grief. Kate quietly excused herself, going to the living room to give them privacy. Thomas pulled Patricia into a hug and she sobbed against his chest. "I miss her too," he said softly. "Every single day. But I can't stop living, Patricia. The girls need me to be present and healthy. They need to see that it's possible to be sad about the past and hopeful about the future at the same time." "I know," Patricia whispered. "I know you're right. I just wasn't ready for this." "I wasn't sure I was ready either," Thomas admitted. "But Kate is special. She's good to me and great with the girls. She's not trying to erase Hannah. She respects Hannah's memory. She's just trying to be part of our lives going forward." Patricia pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things to her. That was cruel." "Maybe you should tell her that," Thomas suggested gently. Patricia nodded and went to find Kate in the living room. Thomas couldn't hear what they said, but when they returned a few minutes later, Patricia's face was softer and Kate's hand was on the older woman's arm in a comforting gesture. They all ate pancakes together, the conversation stilted but civil. Patricia left an hour later, hugging the girls tight and giving Thomas a long look that said they'd talk more later. After she was gone, Kate helped clean up the kitchen while the girls went to play outside. "I'm sorry about that," Thomas said. "She's protective of Hannah's memory. Sometimes too protective." "She's grieving," Kate said. "I understand. And honestly, if I were her, I might react the same way. Watching you move forward must feel like losing Hannah all over again. You're being very understanding, Thomas observed. Because I understand, Kate said simply. Grief is complicated. And I know what Hannah means to this family. I'm not trying to take her place, Thomas. I could never do that. I just want to have my own place if there's room. There's room, Thomas assured her. There's so much room. But that night after Kate left, Thomas lay in bed thinking about Patricia's words. Was it too soon? Were the girls too attached to Kate too quickly? What if this didn't work out? What if Kate decided this was too complicated, too much baggage, too hard? What if he was setting all three of them up for heartbreak? The doubts crept in, small and insidious. And over the next few days Thomas found himself pulling back slightly without meaning to. He canceled a dinner date with Kate, claiming work was busy. He was less responsive to her texts. He suggested maybe they should slow down a bit, take some time to think about things. Kate noticed. Of course she noticed. Did I do something wrong? She asked when he called her one evening. You seem distant. No, Thomas said too quickly. You didn't do anything. I'm just thinking about what Patricia said. About whether we're moving too fast. About whether it's fair to the girls to let them get so attached when we don't know where this is going. Silence on the other end of the line. Thomas, Kate finally said, her voice careful. If you're having doubts, I need you to tell me. I meant what I said before. I'm not here casually. But I also can't be with someone who's not sure about me. I am sure about you, Thomas protested. I'm just not sure about everything else. What does that mean? Kate asked, and there was hurt in her voice now. I don't know, Thomas admitted. I'm confused. I'm scared. I'm worried about making the wrong choice. Another silence. Maybe you need some time to figure out what you want, Kate said quietly. Take a few days. Think about it. And when you know what you want, call me. She hung up before he could respond. Thomas stared at his phone, feeling like he'd just made a terrible mistake but not knowing how to fix it. Sophie appeared in his doorway, her face serious. Why did you tell Kate to go away? I didn't tell her to go away, Thomas said. I just told her I needed time to think. That's the same thing, Sophie said wisely. You're scared. That's okay. But Daddy, Kate is the best thing that's happened to us since Mommy died. Don't mess it up because you're scared. Out of the mouths of babes, Thomas thought ruefully. But his daughter was right. He was scared. And his fear was about to cost him something precious. He just needed to figure out how to be brave again. 3 days passed. 3 miserable days where Thomas went through the motions of work and parenting while feeling like part of him was missing. Sophie and Grace asked about Kate constantly. When was she coming over? Could they call her? Was Daddy still mad? I'm not mad, Thomas kept saying. I'm just thinking. You think too much, Grace said. Mommy used to say that. She was right. Hannah had said that, usually while laughing and pulling him away from whatever he was overthinking. On the 4th day, Rebecca showed up at his house unannounced. She took one look at his face and shook her head. You're an idiot, she announced. Hello to you too, Thomas said. Kate called me, Rebecca said, walking past him into the house. She's heartbroken. She thinks you've changed your mind about her. Have you? No, Thomas said immediately. Of course not. Then what are you doing? Rebecca demanded. You found someone wonderful. Someone who loves your kids and makes you smile for the first time in years. And you're sabotaging it because Patricia got in your head. It's not just that, Thomas protested. I'm worried about the girls. What if things don't work out with Kate? They're so attached already. Thomas, they're going to get attached to people throughout their lives, Rebecca said. That's part of life. You can't protect them from every possible hurt. And honestly, keeping Kate away because you're scared is hurting them more than any potential breakup would. Thomas sat down heavily on the couch. I don't know how to do this, Rebecca. I don't know how to love someone new without feeling like I'm betraying Hannah. Rebecca's expression softened. She sat beside him and took his hand. Hannah is gone, Thomas. I loved my sister more than anything, but she's gone. And she would not want you to be alone forever. You remember what she said at the end, don't you? Thomas nodded, his eyes burning. She said to let myself be happy again. So let yourself be happy, Rebecca said gently. Kate isn't Hannah. She's not trying to be Hannah. She's Kate and she's perfect for you and the girls. Don't throw that away because you're scared. Thomas knew she was right. He'd known it for days. But hearing it out loud helped solidify it. I need to talk to Kate, he said. Yes, you do, Rebecca agreed. And you need to be honest with her. About your fears and your past and what you want for the future. She deserves that honesty. Thomas called Kate that afternoon. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice cautious. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Thomas replied. "Can we talk? In person?" Pause. "Okay. When? Tonight? After I put the girls to bed? I can come to you." "All right," Kate said. "I'll text you my address." That evening, Thomas drove to Kate's apartment with his heart pounding. He'd rehearsed what he wanted to say, but now that he was here, the words felt inadequate. Kate opened the door wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt. She looked beautiful and sad, and Thomas hated that he'd put that sadness there. "Come in," she said. Her apartment was small but cozy. Books everywhere, plants on the windowsills, photos of family and friends on the walls. It felt like Kate, warm and welcoming. They sat on her couch, and for a moment neither spoke. Finally Thomas said, "I'm sorry. For pulling away. For making you feel like you did something wrong. You didn't. This is all me." "Okay," Kate said carefully. "Can you explain what happened? I thought things were going well, and then suddenly you were distant and talking about slowing down." Thomas took a deep breath. "Patricia's visit shook me. The things she said about replacing Hannah, about the girls forgetting their mother, about moving too fast, they got in my head. And I started second-guessing everything. Including me," Kate said quietly. "No," Thomas said firmly. "Not you. Never you. I started second-guessing myself. Whether I deserved to be happy again. Whether I was being unfair to Hannah's memory. Whether I was being a good father by letting you into our lives." Kate listened without interrupting. "But the truth is," Thomas continued, "I was just scared. I'm terrified of losing someone I love again. I'm terrified of the girls getting hurt. I'm terrified of messing this up. So I did what scared people do. I tried to control the situation by pushing you away before you could decide to leave." "I wasn't going to leave," Kate said softly. "I know that now," Thomas said. "Or I'm trying to know that. Kate, you've been nothing but kind and patient and wonderful. You've embraced Sophie and Grace like they're your own. You've made me feel things I thought I'd never feel again. And instead of being grateful for that, I panicked." Kate reached over and took his hand. "Thomas, I need you to hear me. I'm not Hannah. I can never be Hannah, and I don't want to be. Hannah was their mother, and she'll always be their mother. I respect that. But I want to be someone important in their lives too. Someone who loves them and supports them and helps raise them." "I want that too," Thomas said. "More than I can explain." "But," Kate prompted, sensing there was more. "But I need you to understand what you're signing up for," Thomas said. "This isn't a normal relationship. I have 2 kids who need a lot of attention. I have a demanding job. I have an emotional mother-in-law who's going to need time to accept you. I have baggage and complications and a past that still hurts sometimes." "Everyone has baggage," Kate said. "Mine is just different from yours. And yes, this is complicated. But complicated doesn't mean impossible. Thomas, I went into this knowing you had kids. Knowing you were widowed. Knowing it wouldn't be easy. I chose it anyway because I think you're worth it." "Why?" Thomas asked. "Why would you choose this when you could find someone without all these complications?" Kate smiled sadly. "Because I don't want someone without complications. I want you. I want Sophie and Grace. I want movie nights and pancake breakfasts and chaotic dinners where everyone talks at once. I want to help with homework and school plays and bedtime stories. I want to be part of this family if you'll let me." Thomas felt tears slip down his cheeks. "I'm so scared of losing you." "You're not going to lose me," Kate said. "Not unless you push me away. And even then I'll probably fight to stay. Because this, what we have, it's worth fighting for." Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Kate hugged him back just as fiercely, and they stayed like that for a long time. "I love you," Thomas whispered into her hair. "I know it's fast and I know it's probably too soon to say it, but I love you." Kate pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "I love you too. And it's not too soon. It's exactly the right time." They kissed then, finally, a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was the first kiss for both of them in years, and it felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Thomas rested his forehead against Kate's. "I'm sorry I almost ruined this," he said. "You didn't ruin anything," Kate assured him. "You just needed time to process. That's okay. But from now on, when you're scared or confused, talk to me. Don't pull away. We figure things out together." "Together?" Thomas agreed. "I like the sound of that." They talked for hours that night, really talked. About hopes and fears and dreams for the future. About how to introduce Kate more formally into the girls' lives. About how to handle Patricia and other family members. About practical things like logistics and schedules and how to blend their lives together. When Thomas finally left near midnight, he felt lighter than he had in days. He'd been honest with Kate, truly honest, and she hadn't run away. She'd stayed. She'd fought for him, for them, for this relationship. He'd almost thrown away something precious out of fear. He wouldn't make that mistake again. The next Saturday, Thomas invited everyone to his house for dinner. Not just Kate but also Patricia and Rebecca. It was time to have an honest conversation with everyone together. Patricia arrived first, looking nervous. "Thomas, I hope I didn't cause problems with my visit last week." "We need to talk about that," Thomas said gently. "Everyone does." Kate arrived next, looking equally nervous but determined. Sophie and Grace launched themselves at her, and she scooped them both up in a hug. "We missed you so much," Sophie said. "Daddy was sad when you weren't here." "I was sad too," Kate admitted. "But I'm here now." Rebecca was last, breezing in with wine and looking pleased that Thomas had finally gotten his act together. They all gathered in the living room. The girls sat on either side of Kate on the couch. Rebecca took the armchair. Patricia sat stiffly in another chair. Thomas remained standing. "Thank you all for coming," he started. "I wanted everyone together because we need to have an honest conversation about what's happening here." He looked at Patricia. "Patricia, I know Hannah's death was devastating for you. She was your daughter. You loved her. You miss her every day. I get that because I loved her too. She was my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend. Losing her nearly destroyed me." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "But," Thomas continued gently, "I'm still here. Sophie and Grace are still here. And we have to keep living. That's what Hannah wanted. She made me promise to find happiness again, to not spend my life grieving." "I know," Patricia whispered. "I know that's what she'd want. I'm just not ready." "I understand," Thomas said. "But here's the thing. You don't have to be ready. Because this isn't about you. It's about me and my daughters and our happiness." Patricia flinched, but Thomas pressed on, his voice still kind but firm. "Kate isn't replacing Hannah," Thomas said. "Nobody could replace Hannah. But Kate is someone special who's come into our lives, and the girls and I love her. And I need you to accept that. Not right away, not immediately. But eventually. Because Kate is going to be part of our family." He looked at Kate, who smiled through her own tears. "If you can't accept that," Thomas continued, looking back at Patricia, "if you're going to make Kate feel unwelcome or make the girls feel guilty for loving her, then we're going to have to limit our visits. Because I won't let anyone, even you, hurt my family." Patricia was crying openly now. Sophie slipped off the couch and went to her grandmother, climbing into her lap. "It's okay to be sad about Mommy, Grandma," Sophie said, patting Patricia's face gently. "We're sad sometimes too. But we're also happy with Kate. Can we be both? Sad and happy?" Patricia hugged Sophie tightly. "Of course you can, sweetheart. Of course you can." She looked at Grace, who'd stayed with Kate but was watching anxiously. "Both of you can. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being unkind to Kate. That was wrong of me." Grace came over and hugged her grandmother too. "We still love you, Grandma. And we still love Mommy. But we love Kate too. Love doesn't run out." "No, it doesn't," Patricia agreed, her voice choked. "You're absolutely right." She looked at Kate over the girls' heads. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies. I was cruel and unwelcoming, and you didn't deserve that. You've been nothing but kind to my granddaughters and to Thomas. I was protecting my own grief and my own pain, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry." Kate came over and knelt beside Patricia's chair. "I accept your apology. And I want you to know that I will always honor Hannah. She gave Thomas these beautiful girls. She was loved and loving. I'm not trying to erase her or replace her. I just want to be someone who loves this family and supports them." Patricia reached out with one hand and squeezed Kate's. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Rebecca, who'd been watching this whole scene with misty eyes, spoke up. "For what it's worth, I think Hannah would have really liked you, Kate. You're exactly the kind of person she'd want in her daughters' lives." Kate smiled gratefully. "That means everything to me." The evening shifted after that. The tension dissolved, replaced by something warmer. They had dinner together, the conversation flowing more naturally now. Patricia asked Kate questions about her work at the hospital, her family, her interests. Kate asked Patricia about Hannah, listening to stories about Hannah's childhood with genuine interest. The girls were thrilled to see everyone getting along. They chattered happily throughout dinner, clearly relieved that the adults in their lives weren't fighting anymore. After dinner, while Thomas and Rebecca cleaned up in the kitchen, Patricia pulled Kate aside. "I want to give you something," Patricia said, pulling a small box from her purse. This was Hannah's. She wore it every day. She opened the box to reveal a simple silver bracelet with a small heart charm. I've been holding on to it, not sure what to do with it, Patricia continued. I was going to give it to the girls when they were older. But I think Hannah would want you to have it. Kate's eyes widened. Patricia, I can't take this. It's too precious. Please, Patricia said. Hannah would want someone who loves her daughters to have it. Someone who's going to help raise them and care for them. That's you, Kate. Take it. Wear it. Remember that you're part of something that started before you but continues through you. Kate took the bracelet with shaking hands. Patricia helped her put it on and Kate stared at it through tears. Thank you, Kate whispered. I'll treasure it. I know you will, Patricia said. And Kate? Thank you for loving them. All three of them. They need you. The two women hugged and something shifted in that moment. Not complete healing, not instant friendship, but the beginning of acceptance. The beginning of moving forward together instead of fighting against each other. When everyone left that evening, Thomas and Kate stood on the porch together, watching Patricia's car disappear down the street. That went better than I expected, Thomas said. Your daughters are magic, Kate said, touching the bracelet on her wrist. They have a way of making everything better. They learned that from their mother, Thomas said. Hannah always knew how to find the light in dark situations. I wish I could have known her, Kate said wistfully. In a way you do, Thomas said. She's in Sophie and Grace. In the way they love unconditionally. In the way they're brave when they're scared. In the way they bring people together. Kate leaned against him and Thomas wrapped his arm around her. I love you, she said. You and the girls. This whole complicated, beautiful family. We love you too, Thomas said. So much. Inside, Sophie and Grace watched from the window, holding hands and smiling. I told you it would work out, Sophie whispered. You're always right, Grace agreed. And for once, in this moment, everything really was right. 6 months passed. 6 months of building a life together, slowly and carefully. Kate kept her apartment but spent most of her time at Thomas's house. She had a drawer in his dresser, a toothbrush in the bathroom, her favorite coffee in the kitchen. The girls called her Kate, not Mom, and that was perfect. They knew who their mother was, honored her memory, but also embraced Kate's presence in their lives. Patricia visited monthly and was cordial, even warm, to Kate. She was trying, genuinely trying, to accept this new reality. Thomas's construction company was doing well, better than ever. He'd recently been offered a major contract to renovate an entire city block downtown. It was a huge opportunity, the kind that could take his company to the next level. But it would require a significant financial investment up front and would mean longer hours for at least 6 months. Thomas sat at his kitchen table one evening, staring at the contract, weighing the decision. Kate was at work. The girls were at a sleepover at Rebecca's. It was just him and his thoughts. The opportunity was everything he'd worked toward. It would secure his company's reputation, bring in major revenue, set them up financially for years. He'd be able to put more money aside for the girls' college funds. Maybe even think about buying a bigger house. But it meant risk. What if something went wrong? What if he couldn't handle the workload? What if he had to work so much that he missed important moments with Sophie and Grace? And what about Kate? They'd been building something beautiful together. Would she understand if he suddenly became unavailable, working 12-hour days? He was still sitting there an hour later when his phone rang. Kate's name appeared on the screen. Hey, he answered. How's work? Exhausting, Kate said. We had 3 emergencies coming back to back. But everyone's stable now. How are you? How's the decision coming? Thomas had told her about the contract earlier in the week. I'm stuck. It's such a good opportunity, but the timing feels wrong. Why does it feel wrong? Kate asked. Because things are good right now, Thomas said. Really good. With you, with the girls, with everything. What if taking this contract messes that up? Kate was quiet for a moment. Thomas, can I be honest with you? Always. I think you're scared again, she said gently. Not of the work. You can handle the work. You're scared that if you focus on your career, you'll lose what we've built together. Or that you'll miss out on time with the girls. Maybe, Thomas admitted. Is that wrong? It's not wrong, but it's not necessary either, Kate said. Thomas, I'm not going anywhere. If you take this contract and have to work longer hours, I'll be here. I'll help with the girls. I'll make sure they get to school and to activities. I'll make sure they're taken care of. That's what partners do. You do that? Thomas asked, his voice thick. Of course I would, Kate said. I love those girls like they're my own. And I love you. I want you to succeed. I want your business to grow. Take the opportunity, Thomas. We'll figure out the rest together. Thomas felt something loosen in his chest. I don't deserve you. You absolutely do, Kate said firmly. Now stop overthinking and sign that contract. Yes, ma'am, Thomas said, smiling. After they hung up, Thomas read through the contract one more time. Then he signed it, his hand steady and sure. The next 6 months were challenging. Thomas worked longer hours than he had in years. Some days he left before the girls woke up and came home after they'd gone to bed. The project was massive, complex, demanding. But Kate was there. She moved more of her things into the house, unofficially living with them. She helped Sophie with her math homework. She braided Grace's hair for school. She made dinner and left plates for Thomas to heat up when he got home late. On Thomas's most difficult days, Kate would text him pictures of the girls doing something silly or sweet. She'd send encouragement and reminders that what he was doing mattered. The girls adjusted. They missed having Daddy around as much, but they understood he was working hard for their future. And having Kate there softened the impact of his absence. Rebecca helped too, taking the girls some weekends and helping with school pickups. Even Patricia stepped up, visiting more often to help out. It felt like everyone was working together, supporting Thomas while he pursued this dream. 3 months into the project, Thomas came home one evening to find Kate and the girls in the kitchen, covered in flour and laughing. They were making cookies and the kitchen was a disaster. What's all this? Thomas asked, smiling despite his exhaustion. We're celebrating, Sophie announced. You got the award thing. Thomas looked at Kate, confused. The city announced the nominations for their Business Excellence Awards, Kate explained. Your company was nominated. It was in the paper today. Thomas had forgotten all about that. He'd submitted an application months ago but hadn't expected anything to come of it. That's amazing, he said, genuinely surprised. We're proud of you, Daddy, Grace said, hugging his waist. You work so hard. Thomas looked around at his kitchen full of flour and laughter, at his daughter's happy faces, at Kate's warm smile. I couldn't do any of this without all of you, he said. You know that, right? Kate, especially you. You've held everything together while I've been focused on work. That's what family does, Kate said simply. We support each other. The word family hung in the air, significant and beautiful. That night, after the girls were in bed and the kitchen was cleaned, Thomas and Kate sat on the back porch together, looking at the stars. I want to marry you, Thomas said suddenly. Kate turned to look at him. What? Not right now, Thomas clarified. I don't have a ring. I haven't planned anything. But Kate, I want to marry you. I want you to be my wife. I want to make this official. Will you think about it? Kate's eyes filled with tears. I don't need to think about it. Yes. Whenever you're ready, my answer is yes. They kissed under the stars, and Thomas felt complete in a way he hadn't since before Hannah died. He'd been so scared to move forward, so worried about betraying the past. But this wasn't betrayal. This was honoring everything Hannah had wanted for him. This was building a new life without erasing the old one. This was choosing happiness and love and hope. This was exactly right. 1 year after that chaotic first date at Romano's restaurant, Thomas proposed to Kate properly. He took her back to the same restaurant, to the same table where Sophie and Grace had shown up with their piggy bank money and brave hearts. This time the girls were in on the plan. They hid behind a potted plant near the entrance, barely containing their excitement. When Thomas got down on one knee and pulled out the ring he'd spent weeks choosing, Kate started crying before he even finished asking the question. Kate Rodriguez, you walked into our lives when we needed you most. You loved my daughters without hesitation. You supported my dreams. You made me believe in second chances. Will you marry me and officially become part of this family? Yes, Kate said through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger, and the girls exploded from their hiding place, running over to hug Kate and dance around the table. Other diners clapped and cheered, caught up in the joy of the moment. Does this mean you're going to be our bonus mom? Sophie asked, using the term they'd all agreed on. Not stepmom, which felt like replacing someone. Bonus mom, which felt like adding someone. Yes, Kate said, pulling both girls into a tight hug. If that's okay with you too. It's perfect, Grace said. We've been waiting forever for Daddy to ask. He's slow, Sophie added with a giggle. Thomas laughed, pulling all three of them into his arms. I love you all so much. The wedding was planned for 6 months later. Nothing too big or elaborate. Just family and close friends in Thomas's backyard, which he and Kate spent weeks making beautiful. Sophie and Grace served as flower girls, wearing matching yellow dresses in honor of that first Saturday when they'd marched into the restaurant on their rescue mission. Rebecca was Kate's maid of honor. She cried through the entire ceremony, proud of her brother for finding love again and grateful to Kate for being exactly what their family needed. Patricia attended, wearing navy blue and holding tissues. When it came time for the vows, she was crying as hard as everyone else. She'd come so far in accepting Kate, in recognizing that her granddaughters having another person to love them was a gift, not a threat. Thomas's vows made everyone cry. He spoke about loss and healing, about fear and courage, about how Sophie and Grace had taught him to be brave. He talked about the night Kate had stayed even though he was late, about how she'd welcomed his chaotic life without hesitation. Kate's vows were just as emotional. She spoke about moving to a new city alone and finding a family she hadn't expected. She promised to love and honor Thomas, to cherish Sophie and Grace, to build a life filled with joy and hope and second chances. But the most emotional moment came when Sophie and Grace stepped forward with their own vows. "Kate," Sophie said, reading from a card she'd written herself. "You came into our lives when we needed you. You made our daddy smile again. You play with us and help us with homework and give the best hugs. We promise to love you and listen to you and be good so you don't regret becoming our bonus mom. And we promise to tell you stories about our first mommy," Grace added, also reading from a prepared card. "Because she was really great and we want you to know her. And we think she would really like you. And we hope you like us too because we really, really like you." By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. Kate knelt down and hugged both girls, whispering something to them that made them nod and smile. Later, Kate told Thomas what she'd said: "Your mommy will always be your mommy. And I'm so lucky to be your bonus mom. I love you both so much." The reception was simple and fun. Dancing in the grass, good food, lots of laughter. Patricia gave a speech that surprised everyone with its warmth and grace. "When I lost my daughter," Patricia said, her voice steady despite the emotion, "I thought I'd lost everything. But watching my granddaughters today, seeing how happy they are, seeing the family that's been built here, I realize Hannah's love lives on. It lives on in Sophie and Grace. And now it lives on in Kate too, who loved these girls enough to embrace their complicated history. Hannah would approve of this marriage. She would love Kate. And I do too." Kate hugged Patricia for a long time after that speech, both women crying and healing together. As the sun set and the party wound down, Thomas and Kate stood together, watching Sophie and Grace dance with their cousins. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Kate asked. "Since that first date?" "Best failed date ever," Thomas said, grinning. "The girls really are the heroes of this story," Kate said. "They absolutely are," Thomas agreed. "Those two brave little matchmakers who took a taxi across town to save their dad's chance at happiness." "I'm so grateful they did," Kate said, leaning into Thomas. "I'm grateful for all of this. For you, for them, for this beautiful, complicated, perfect family we've built." "Me too," Thomas said, kissing her forehead. "Every single day, me too." 6 months later, Kate officially adopted Sophie and Grace as their bonus mom. It was a small ceremony at the courthouse, but it meant everything. The girls now had 2 moms listed on their school forms. 2 moms to call when they were sick or scared or needed advice. Hannah would always be their first mom, the one who gave them life. But Kate was their second mom, the one who'd chosen them, who'd loved them without obligation, who'd shown them that families can grow and change and still be whole. Life wasn't perfect after the wedding. There were still hard days. Days when Sophie or Grace missed Hannah and cried. Days when Patricia struggled with grief. Days when Thomas worked too much or Kate was exhausted from the hospital. But they faced those hard days together as a family. They supported each other, loved each other, held each other up when things got difficult. And there were so many good days. Days filled with laughter and adventures. School plays and soccer games and family dinners. Holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that felt magical simply because they were together. 2 years after the wedding, Kate and Thomas welcomed a son. They named him Henry, and Sophie and Grace were over the moon to be big sisters. They helped with feedings and diaper changes and constantly wanted to hold their baby brother. "Do you think Henry will take a taxi to help someone someday?" Grace asked one evening while watching him sleep. "I hope not," Thomas said, laughing. "One taxi adventure per family is enough." "But if he's brave like us, he might," Sophie said proudly. "Then we'll deal with it," Kate said, smiling. "Because that's what this family does. We show up for each other. We fight for each other. We love each other fiercely." On Henry's first birthday, the whole family gathered in the backyard for a party. Patricia was there, playing with her grandchildren and genuinely smiling. Rebecca was there with her new girlfriend, happy and proud of the family her brother had built. Thomas's construction business was thriving. Kate had recently been promoted at the hospital. But the best part was the laughter. The sound of Sophie and Grace giggling as they played with Henry. The sound of Thomas and Kate talking with friends. The sound of happiness that filled every corner of their home. That night, after everyone had left and the kids were in bed, Thomas and Kate sat on their back porch, the same place where he'd first told her he wanted to marry her. "Thank you," Thomas said quietly. "For what?" Kate asked. "For staying," Thomas said. "That first night at the restaurant when I was so late. You could have left. Most people would have. But you stayed. And then my crazy daughters showed up and you stayed through that too. You stayed through my doubts and fears and complications. You just kept staying." "I stayed because I saw something worth staying for," Kate said simply. "I saw a man who loved his daughters more than anything. I saw two brave little girls who knew what they needed even when the adults didn't. I saw a family that had been broken but was ready to heal. How could I leave that?" "I'm so glad you didn't," Thomas said, pulling her close. They sat together in comfortable silence, looking at the stars, thinking about everything that had led them to this moment. A burst pipe and a blind date. Two 6-year-olds with piggy banks and determination. Fear and doubt and courage. Loss and grief and healing. Second chances and new beginnings. All of it had led here, to this porch, to this life, to this family. And it was exactly where they were meant to be. 10 years after that first chaotic dinner at Romano's restaurant, Sophie and Grace celebrated their 16th birthday. They were beautiful teenagers now, smart and kind and still brave. The family had grown. Henry had 2 younger siblings now, twins again because apparently that ran in families. Patricia was still around, a loving grandmother who'd fully embraced Kate as family. Rebecca was married now too, with kids of her own. For their birthday, Sophie and Grace asked to go back to Romano's restaurant, to the place where everything had changed. They sat at the same table, though it barely fit all of them now. Thomas and Kate, Sophie and Grace, Henry and the twins. "I can't believe it's been 10 years, Grace said, looking around the familiar restaurant. "We were so little," Sophie said. "Do you remember how scared we were? Taking that taxi?" "You two were the bravest kids I'd ever met," Kate said, reaching across to squeeze their hands. "You still are." "We just knew Daddy needed help," Grace said, smiling at Thomas. "And we knew Kate was special." "You two saw that before I did," Thomas admitted. "You've always been smarter than me." "Obviously," Sophie teased. After dinner, as they were leaving, a young woman approached their table. She looked nervous but determined. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the Bennett family?" They all looked at her, confused. "Yes," Thomas said carefully. "Can we help you?" "You don't know me," the woman said. "But 10 years ago I was working as a dispatcher for a taxi company. 2 little girls called asking for a ride to this restaurant. They said it was a hard emergency. I sent my most trusted driver to get them, and I've wondered about them ever since." "Was that you too?" Sophie and Grace's eyes went wide. "That was us," they said together. The woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "I've thought about you so many times. I wondered if everything worked out. If the heart emergency got resolved." "It did," Kate said, standing up and pulling the woman into a hug. "Thanks to you. Thanks to your kindness and trust in helping 2 brave little girls." "I'm so glad," the woman said. "You have a beautiful family." "We really do," Thomas agreed, looking around at his wife, his children, his whole chaotic, wonderful family. As they left the restaurant that night, Sophie and Grace walked hand in hand, the way they always had. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Grace asked quietly. "That day we took the taxi?" "Are you kidding?" Sophie said. "Look at our family. Look at how happy everyone is. We definitely did the right thing." "Yeah," Grace agreed. "We really did." And they had. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is fight for someone else's happiness. Sometimes love requires courage and piggy bank money and a taxi ride across town. Sometimes the best families are built from second chances and blind dates and brave little girls who refuse to let hope die. The Bennett family walked out of Romano's restaurant together, into the cool Portland night, their laughter echoing down the street. A family built from loss and love, from grief and grace, from taxi rides and second chances. A family that proved that even the worst first dates can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And somewhere, somehow, Hannah was smiling.